This unusual time has resulted in many more people posting all kinds of entertaining, interesting and thought-provoking videos online. Now, I've really enjoyed seeing some of them, and I haven't done anything because it's not something at which I'm very good and I don't have much to add. But I've been thinking about Easter Sunday a lot lately, and I thought I might share a few thoughts to those who would be interested. It's a funny day, I feel, between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. For example, in our church we usually have a service on the morning of Good Friday, and then on the Sunday we have our usual 2 worship services, and then on the Monday we have a big preaching rally with 2 services and hundreds of visitors. Not this year, of course, but you get the idea. Easter Sunday or Easter Saturday is isolated. It's different. It's an island of quietness in a long and busy weekend. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. It's good to have peaceful times. It's good to have times to relax, to enjoy nature or family or even work. But for some who perhaps, follow the church calendar in some sense, for better or worse, Easter Saturday is an interesting pause in a busy time. The previous Sunday, Palm Sunday, that's often used to remember the triumphant entry of Jesus Christ into Jerusalem. And then if you follow the events of the week through, well, you have the second cleansing of the temple, you have the withering of the fig tree, you have more tricky questions being given to Jesus by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, questions about the resurrection and about paying taxes and about the Great Commandment and about the Messiah. And that's followed by Christ's denunciation of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And then after this, on the Mount of Olives, Christ speaks about the fall of Jerusalem, about the signs of the end of the world, and that probably takes place on the Wednesday of the week. And there is a meal at some point in that week or in the week just preceding, possibly even the Wednesday night, a meal given in honour of Jesus at the house of Simon the leper. And during that meal, wherever it quite fits into the chronology, Mary, the sister of the recently raised Lazarus, she anoints Jesus with perfume. She's preparing his body for burial. And it was probably on the Wednesday evening that Judas went to the chief priests and he arranged to betray Jesus for the price of 30 silver coins. And then on the Thursday, which is often called Maundy Thursday, we have the familiar events of the Passover, the washing of the feet of the disciples, the institution of the Lord's Supper, and so on. And then that leads to a late night walk to the Garden of Gethsemane, and everything that then unfolds from there. Now, the Friday of the week itself is very familiar to many of us. We think the year is AD 30. If so, the Friday is probably April the 7th. And so the sun would have arisen a little after 6 a.m, just after Herod had tried and failed to get Jesus to show him some miracle. Herod returns Christ to Pilate, and Jesus is sentenced to death. Not because he is guilty, but just to appease the mob, he is taken away to be crucified. And as the rising sun begins to shine in its light and heat over Jerusalem, the beaten and abused body of Jesus is seen stumbling towards Calvary. Whilst a few steps behind him there's an African, a man called Simon, who is now carrying the cross that is too heavy for a man who has faced abuse after abuse. And it's about 9 a.m. that Christ is nailed to the cross. He is hung up to expire in the heat of the day. And after about 6 hours of anguish and agony and atonement, he commits his spirit to his Father and he breathes his last. And over the remaining course of that day, there's only 3 or 4 hours left, as the Jews would count the days sunset to sunset. In the remaining 3 or 4 hours, Pilate is informed of the death of Jesus. And Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, they take down the body and they quickly wrap it in linen along with a quantity of spices. There is no time to be precise and methodical. The sun is sinking fast in the west. The moment it sets, the Sabbath has begun. a day of rest, a day of quietness, a day of ceasing from work, labour, trading, of doing anything associated with uncleanness, like handling a dead body. Even with the death of Jesus, the apparent Messiah of God, the followers of Jesus still want to obey the law of God. And so Joseph and Nicodemus hurry so as to honour the Sabbath. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee, including Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Jesus, they go with Joseph and Nicodemus to the tomb. They see where the body of Jesus is buried, and then they hurry home. Perhaps as they hurry home, they might buy preserving spices and perfumes on the way, but they must do it before sunset, because we know that they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. Luke tells us so in his Gospel, Luke chapter 23, verse 56. And then the sun sets. And as its rays dip below the horizon, the scene in Jerusalem is horrific. At the foot of the cross on Calvary, the blood-stained grass is still damp. In the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea lies the cooling body of one who accepted worship, who forgave sins, who healed hundreds, who fed thousands, who raised the dead. He who had overcome death in others himself has died. And as the darkness of the Sabbath arrives, there is a great darkness in the minds of many who had thought that Jesus truly was, as he claimed, the light of the world. The hearts of others, though they are celebrating at the death of Christ, are also incredibly dark. It seems as though God is dead, God remains dead, and they have killed him. And then after the evening, the morning comes, and as the sun rises on the Sabbath day, its dawning rays do not speak of hope. The tomb remains occupied, the life is still extinguished, death still reigns in the minds and hearts of many. Indeed, the religious leaders are such hypocrites that they will go and meet with unclean Gentiles on their very own day of rest in order to negotiate placing a seal upon the tomb to ensure that there is no tampering possible. They will desecrate their own special day out of fear of some conspiracy. Regarding the darkness of this day, this Sabbath, as the Jews saw it, this Saturday of Easter, many Christians say, Sunday is coming. And they're right, of course they are. There is light in the darkness, and there is hope beyond death. But right now, if we truly are following the events of these tragic days, I think we should pause. So quickly we run from the agony of Calvary to the wonder of the resurrection. But in so doing, I think we rush past that time of darkness. It hurts us. It is ugly. It is unwanted. And so we run to the light. That is human. That is natural. That is to be expected. But that is not what the disciples could do. Those first followers of Christ could see no light in the darkness. For them, as the sun rose on that dreadful Saturday, it rose to shine on men and women who were bereft, who were heartbroken, who could see no reason for hope anywhere. You know how the story ends. You know that there is comfort and consolation to come. You know that victory is certain. But put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Imagine you didn't see the ending. What a bleak picture you suddenly see. A small ragtag group of men and women in fear in Jerusalem. Their master murdered, their expectation extinguished, their dreams destroyed. You might say, well, didn't Jesus tell them that these things were going to happen? Didn't he say that he would be betrayed and crucified and rise again on the third day? Shouldn't these disciples have been able to see the truth by faith? You'd probably be right. But we are human too. This curious mixture of physical and ethereal. this painful dialectic between ashes and glory, and the physical realities around us so often blind us to the spiritual realities. And though the Sabbath sun shines upon them, the Christ followers feel they are in unending and unrelenting darkness, hopeless and helpless and alone. This is a reality that many may feel at times, with no clear sight of change, no expectation of rescue, no comprehension that things can improve. Before we run to the Sunday, let us dwell in the Saturday. Before we sing those wonderful words of Philip Doddridge, "Not all the bolts and bars of death the conqueror could detain," we must sing, "Thus lo, the Lord of life was brought. Such wonders love can do. Thus cold in death that body lay, which throbbed and bled for you." Sunday is coming. The light will shine, darkness will end, and death itself will be destroyed. But don't rush past Saturday. Dwell here in the darkness for a time. It will not last forever. The disciples had to endure it, uncertain and untrusting as to whether again they would ever see light. Walk through the valley of shadow. In so doing, taking your time here, well, the light will be brighter and more glorious when it does arise. Before tomorrow's celebration, remember the dreadful things summarized in the Apostles' Creed, which declares that Christ suffered under Pontius Pilate, he was crucified, dead and buried, he descended into Hades. Question 44 of the Heidelberg Catechism asks us, why is it added, he descended into Hades? It gives the answer, that in my greatest temptations, that is, my greatest trials, my greatest difficulties, whatever situation I face, in my greatest temptations, I may be assured that Christ, my Lord, by his inexpressible anguish, pains and terrors, which he suffered in his soul and the cross and before, has redeemed me from the anguish and torment of hell. For those disciples, that Easter Saturday began in darkness, and at the sunset, the day ended in darkness. Nothing seemed to have changed. Perhaps you can't see a change. Perhaps the darkness remains and you feel unhelped and unhealed and uncomforted and unillumined. But the disciples' inability to see the hope did not extinguish the hope. Victory was certain, though unseen. The psalmist in Psalm 38 begins by crying out to God, and he ends by crying out to God. In the course of his psalm he perceives no benefit, but with his limited view he has not yet seen how things conclude. The disciples, though seemingly in dreadful darkness, they did not see the glory that lay ahead. Perhaps you are walking in darkness and you cannot even see the faintest glimmer of light at present. The Bible speaks of people like you. It reminds you that you do not see how things end. But it also tells you that you are too small and your vision too blinkered to judge all things accurately. Wait in the darkness. Learn the lessons in this time. Seek to trust not only in the seen but in the revealed. What would you have said to those disciples on that Easter Saturday? Words of patience, of endurance, of coming expectation? No darkness will last forever for the Christian. The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings to bless his people and to deal with his enemies. But for now, if you remain in darkness, what will you do? What will you learn? Where will you go? Sunday morning is coming, but not yet.